thanks for coming, and a special thank you to Saaleha, who's come all the way from Gauteng, Durban, to join us this morning. Afternoon. I'm sorry that there are not more people here, but anyway, it's nice to see all of you, and I'm looking forward to talking with them about their books. So, Saaleha's book is Home Scar, and it's a novel which is set in Joburg in the 70s. So it's a kind of historical novel, especially for somebody of Saaleha's age, because she had to research the book. Whereas if I'd written it, it would have just been, you know, personal reflection or whatever. I mean, obviously one also has to do research, but anyway, sorry. And then, I mean, I'll come back and say more about it, but, or, you know, we'll all say more about it. And this is Arderne, and this is the novel of hers that we're looking at today, which is called 1,000 Eyes on You. And it's a very different book to Home Scar. It's a fantasy novel, would you say, and aimed at the YA readers. Well, I mean, as a OA reader, I found it very readable and interesting. So I think it's in spite of that niche that you were aiming at, I think it's interesting for everyone. And I mean, you didn't write specifically for young adults, but your book could be easily read by young adults and enjoyed by them as well. So those are the similarities. And also they both have teenage protagonists. I'm just trying to, so, and they're both love stories as well. Yours is like one love story, yours is love stories. Which also shows, I think, the difference in time, because the way young people love each other, I think, is a bit different today than it was in the 70s. I don't know. I mean, that's my sense. Also from having a young person, my daughter in my life, who's in her early 20s. So I have a sense that young people operate differently than we did. Right, I don't know if that's saying enough in this introduction. Let's hear from the authors. Just okay, let's just ask a question that's often asked. How did you come to write this particular book? I want to ask both of you that. Like, why did this book press on you? Where did it come from?
I kind of figured you're a person who reads a lot, and I've read ever since I was a child, and there's not a lot of fiction written about people who look like me. So I felt that story needed to be told, what the experience of growing up as an Indian child in an Indian area would have been like during apartheid. I thought that story needed to be told, and I think that was actually the motivation, but then obviously the themes that came in were also things I thought were important to explore.
But also, why the 70s? Why a historical novel?
So 1970, okay, I was born in 77, so that's why I had to research this. But 76 was a cultural movement for young people. It's like a moment in time for young people in South Africa. Because now that I'm working on the next novel, and that has entailed a whole lot of research into the 76 uprising, you come to understand that it was all driven by young people. And it's amazing to imagine that the landscape of South African history could have been changed by young people. I think 76 was the moment when the apartheid government began to unravel. That was the moment. And after that, everything just fell into place, and here we are now.
I like the way you said it. I mean, I think that what's fascinating for me about your book is that, you know, you deal with heavy themes in a sense, but she has the lightest touch, you know, so it's not like reading a sort of heavy, I don't know how to put it, you know, it's sort of heavy, dreary, historical. I mean, I'm talking from people that don't like history. So I love it, but, you know, wading through it and feeling overwhelmed by it. I mean, there's a love story at the heart of it. It's set in that time, so those things just are pressing on the characters. So, yeah, it's
we are all products of our environment in many ways.
yes.
So obviously the love she chose and the life she chose was obviously going to be influenced by whatever was going on around her.
Yeah.
Then needed to come to life.
Yeah. And you, yeah? Why did you, because your previous book wasn't for young adults, right?
It was very much for adults. Yeah. I think with this book, I wrote the book shortly after my grandmother died, and I felt I still heard her voice in my head a little bit, so I wanted to carry on that character just to kind of get her voice on paper. And so she is a fairy, really, a spirit in this book, and it looks a bit at her history, which takes right back to the group areas after elections and what things will be like through young experiences. You don't often think like our grandmother's young experiences. So I looked a bit into my family lineage, and which I guess was really inspired by her passing.
And is Ma, so, I mean, did she have a spell book?
I think she passed a lot of magic on to me. She didn't have a physical spell book like Ma in this book, but she's a deeply spiritual person. So I think a lot of that is included in this spell book that this fictional Ma character gives to her granddaughter,
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, what was also interesting for me, and in a sense, both alluded to it, but is that both books, refer to some of the horrors of apartheid. It was just part of the story, you know, like the characters and their love stories and the things they're trying to do and feel and get away with. It's sort of like the main thing, but, you know, I found that fascinating that also came in. And, you know, for a fantasy book, the way you did it was really interesting. Sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I was actually saying, a lot when we research these things and go back into a passage, we learn things that you would never know. Like, for instance, when 76 happened, the police were trying to arrest everyone who'd been involved in protests. And they went to Marijuana Hospital and they instructed the doctors that anyone that comes into the ER with a bullet wound, you need to give us their details. And then the doctors and nurses decided that every bullet wound would be recorded as an abscess. So everyone would be taken into surgery to drain an abscess when in fact they were removing bullets from protests.
Yes.
And I mean, these are little nuggets of history that you learn. You know, it's amazing.
Yes. I mean, just tell us how you did those pieces. I mean, obviously the one character, Tyler, his father was he was in the SAD. Was he a career military person? I mean, he wasn't just pulled out, he actually stayed.
Yeah, so he was conscripted at 18 and then he just stayed
Right.
in the
Right. But so how did you, apart from Tyler's father, which is very important and also links then to Kayla's story later on, which we won't explain how, but how do you stylistically bring in apartheid and the experiences that Kayla's grandmother had?
So,
Sorry, can you hear? Are we talking loud enough? Okay. All right. Sorry, suddenly, yeah. I should go and sit over there so that I... You want to stop? No, I was saying I should go and sit over there so that I'm talking loudly to you, but at the same time loudly. Yeah. Anyway, let's just all try and talk loudly.
okay.
Yeah.
So those characters, those older characters, I interviewed both my mother and my grandmother about their first-hand experiences during that time. So I ended up having a lot of archival information, but I really wanted to get to both of them because we don't hear those stories, right? We often don't ask our mothers or grandmothers what happened during their lifetime. So once I got a sense of that, I can't say the same with Tyler's father because he was a soldier. But for him, I spoke to someone that I know who was also conscripted into the army, and I just learned a lot from the father and maternal characters who were either incarcerated or evicted. I had to speak to my own family, and so yeah, I thought it was quite a privilege to get this information firsthand and to use that to create all the characters, all the generation characters, I think, in a more authentic way, just using the family history.
So I'm also asking about the stylistic, like how did you convey that information to us, the reader, as well?
So with those experiences, stylistically, I would have them, because there's magic in my book.
Yeah.
So Ma, for example, could cast spells, could cast a curse on the soldiers who evicted her. She could curse them and have them slowly be paralyzed and their throats close and die. And so it ended up stylistically took on more of a fantasy approach where the oppressors could be avenged in the story rather than a realism. So I wanted to see some justice, some past justice in that.
Yeah, so it might sound from the part that we've been speaking about that these are the main aspects of the story, and they're very important, but they're not. There's a lot more to both of the stories. I think that the titles are interesting. Let's start with you, Nia, and maybe you could read that little bit that I mentioned, because, well, maybe do you want to say something first and then I don't know. Sure. Either way. So Nia's book is called 1,000 Eyes on You, which even if you don't read the book and you think that it's a book about teenagers, teenager protagonists, I mean, there's a lot that you could start thinking about and wondering about. But let's hear from the author.
So this little passage I'm going to read is about the 1,000 eyes in the forest. And those 1,000 eyes are there because there is a goddess in this forest who, every time there's a harasser or violator or predator, she transforms them into bark, into wood, and they can't move, and they become part of the tree, and then only the eyes are left bulging out of the tree. So that's kind of a curse that she acts on all predators. So this is a short part from when my main character, Kayla, discovers these eyes in the forest. She found herself in a dense forest, hundreds of trees stretching as far as she could see in the dim, dusty light. There was something strange about the nearest one. As Kayla walked closer to inspect it, she saw dozens of eyes bulging out of the trunk. The other trees were the same, and all the eyes followed her, leering at her lasciviously. Their roots seemed to be alive, moving, crawling, breathing, covered in moss. She ran, and as she ran, the leering eyes in the bark of the trees continued to follow her every step. There was no getting away from them. There were 1,000 eyes on her. It was as if every man who had ever ogled her in her life was a pair of eyes embedded in the trees of this forest.
Sure. And I mean, is there anything more you want to say about the title without spoilers?
So the eyes being something that are bulging out of not just a face, like from trees and from walls and from mirrors, is a theme that's quite constantly explored in the book. And whose eyes are they? Who do those eyes belong to? Is it a man that she knows? Is it a man that's oppressed somebody in her family? Is it a monster? So I think the eyes are quite important in the sense that it really speaks to the mystery of the novel and not knowing who those eyes belong to until we kind of get to the end.
And I mean, I think that for me also, in a young adult novel, to have the idea of eyes and being watched and being seen and being observed and, what's that word? Surveilled in a sense. It's very much an experience of younger people. I mean, I don't know whether this has happened, I can't tell how old people are yet, but I mean, I think as you get older, certainly for women, your eyes come back inside of you and you start noticing the surveillance, or maybe the surveillance stops, I don't know. But I think that for teenagers, for young people, you know, I mean, at schools, they're watched.
Yeah.
And they're so beautiful as they walk around in the world. They're watched by, you know, these predators and whoever. And they watch each other as well. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but I just think there's also that in the title that I think is very important.
She's also got thousands of followers on social media.
Oh, right.
Kind of her every move, every post. And so she curates her life quite a lot to cater for these 1,000 eyes that are on her as digitally as well.
Yes, I forgot about that. Okay, home spa. Tell us about your title.
Okay, so the home spa is actually, you know, your rock limpets. So we at the coast, everyone's seen a limpet. So essentially what they do when the tide is in, they move around on the rocks and they graze on algae. When the tide goes out, they go to a little scar on the rock that fits their shell perfectly. So that scar, that home scar, actually protects them from the elements. So tide is out, that means the little mollusk doesn't dry out and die in his shell. And the idea was, so it was a play on words because home is often the place where our first scars are inflicted, and often those scars last forever. But also your home scar is that place that you go to when it gets turbulent. So we've all got a home scar. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's a place, maybe. So that was the idea behind it.
Thanks. I mean, that brings me to another point that I noticed when I was comparing the two novels and thinking about them together. There's a lot of, sorry, I just want to drink some water. There's a lot of sort of disillusionment with adults in both of the novels. I mean, not all the adults are
Letting them down.
yeah, but many of them are. And, you know, Tyler's father is the worst example of that in your book. There's So I mean, I think that that's also very interesting that to think about those issues. I mean, do you want to say anything about that, or?
I think a big part of being young is feeling misunderstood. Yeah. Because I mean, your view of the world and the view of the adults around you does not align. So you always feel like you're saying one thing, but they're hearing something else, or they're saying one thing and you're hearing something else. And I think that comes through. I think that's really good, isn't it?
They're also fallible, you know, adults, your parents, your grandparents, your aunties, your uncles, they are fallible, flawed human beings. And I think teenagers, they see that.
I've got 5 kids, and my daughter, the third kid, she used to always say when she was young, she thought I knew everything. And one day she asked me a question that I couldn't answer. And she felt like a whole view of the world had just been unmade because she asked me a question and I didn't have an answer. So yeah, there's that.
I mean, I feel like that's a very mild failing compared to some of the failings of the adults in both the book and the world. So let's just have a look at the time. It's quite short.
Yes, would you like me to do
Yeah,
that?
could you? Yeah, you
I'm
read your
very
excerpt.
Okay. Okay, so I was initially going to do a bit that explained the concept of the home star, but I figured that since we came down, let's talk about the sisters instead. Okay. Imam Muhsin Peck is every bit the maverick Imam. Unlike our Maulanas, he's a man of great love and abundant warmth, accessible, open. He doesn't behave like women are clay, which is refreshing for both Rabia and me. We are used to our Maulanas who seem very dedicated to keeping women subservient. He's a modern-day St. Valentine, arranging nikahs across the color line. He's the activist at whose home Nelson Mandela has often dined. I see Tani Bida as the renegade chef, defying the Secret Service by whipping up cabbage stew and rice with a side of beetroot so Mandela can fart his way to freedom and continue being the Black Pimpernel. The thought makes me laugh out loud, and everyone stops to give me a look. I gulp. Tannie Beck is a white woman. Everything about her is white, from her hips to her smile to her laugh. But her whiteness fits her. She owns it, and the world has no choice but to arrange itself around her expansiveness or die trying. And so it does. Nou, hoekom staan almal hier? Kom binne. Tannie Vida leads Rabia and me to the lounge. Imam Mohsin and the boys follow. Rabia reaches for my hand. Her palm is slick. I give her hand a squeeze and marvel at how dry my own palms are. And then they aren't. Sit down, Tannie Vida smiles. I'll make some tea and bring out the persisters, or Khalif will never forgive me.
No. Yeah, I mean, I learned so much from reading both of the books. I mean, one of the things which I mentioned when we had the launch in Cape Town, it's a little bit of a Romeo and a Juliet situation. Well, in a way, in both of them, although it's not as elaborated in yours as much, but in the love affair over here. And this is not a spoiler because it's quite, it's quite early on, but Asma, the main character, is in love with Gareth, and so they both come from Muslim families, but Asma is an Indian Muslim and he's a so-called colored Muslim. And you know, I didn't realize that was a thing, that her parents would disapprove of that. Do you want to just say a bit more about
that?
that?
I think the 70s was that time when an Indian parent would disapprove if the person you wanted to marry wasn't from the same village in India. So the fact that she was bringing home a Malay boy was like, what are you thinking? I think that's the thing. And I do think, I mean, for a lot of people, when you look at the Muslim community, you think it's this homogenous group of people and everyone thinks the same and looks the same and acts the same, but it isn't. There's just so many different ways of being Muslim.
Yeah. But I mean, also what occurred to me was I wondered whether there was something about a society structured, you know, on apartheid principles that made that
I think
more solidified.
I think I mean apartheid made it othered everyone.
Right.
It othered everyone. So we as Indian people, you look at the Malay people, and technically they were classed as colored, and therefore on some level they were below us. You know, that is how Indian people thought, and it just continues.
Yes.
And it's I do think, I mean, as much as we're 30 years on, I do not think we've actually moved beyond that fully. You just have to look at the comment section and some of the stuff on social media to understand that we've got a long way to go as a country.
Right. So anyway, Saaleha's writing a sequel, and that's going to focus on Gareth's story because he mysteriously disappears, which is a bit of a spoiler. But, sorry. Anyway, we're going to find out as soon as she's finished what happens to Gareth. But yeah, so it's a kind of a Romeo and Juliet in the sense that, you know, especially us as parents, we don't really get to meet.
We get to know more about her mum. We get to know
No,
more
but I'm
about
talking about
his
Gareth's
parents. No,
Yeah.
no. But in the next one, you get to meet his parents and understand why he is who he is.
Right. And I mean, what was interesting in your book, so it's much harder for me to explain because I'm not really a fantasy person. So I'm not quite sure how you describe these things, but some of the characters who are friends at school and so on have another life, another world that they're part of, right? And within that, there are sort of people who are so-called better and people who seem to be worse. Am I right?
Yes.
I mean, I think it's a spoiler to tell about
Sure,
that.
So some of the characters do have, I don't know, like like they're hybrid between their species going on. There's a hierarchies within those species. And so we have like elemental lines. Like there are spirits and creatures of the sky, spiritual creatures of the sea that lead into the lineages of these characters. And some of them are incompatible. Like if you have say, a character that has, that is partially of the sea, they can't go into the world with a character that is of the sky. And so there are separations between these hybrid species that some of the characters in the book have access to and others don't.
Right, right. But I mean, there was also a way in which it seemed to me that the air characters also, or at least some of them, looked down on the mer characters who were the ones who were of the sea.
Yeah. Well, of course, because the air characters can fly, and the mer characters are stuck in the ocean and the lakes, so they kind of look down on them like, oh, you're trapped here,
Right.
you have to go anywhere.
Right. Except you can't go in the sea.
No, you can't go in the sea.
Yeah, but so in a sense, the elements where those characters live become the sort of like the Romeo and Juliet aspect. I mean, you know, the two main. This is getting into spoiler territory. Anyway, I'm not going to go into it, but yeah, it's fascinating, and I think you must read it definitely because it's a really interesting way Nia has done that and played those things out. Yeah, but I'm not going to say more, I think. Otherwise I'm going to give the story away. Yeah, so the other thing, I mean, there's so many aspects that you play out differently, but that's the way in which these novels speak to each other. So there's the issue of language, which your excerpt, hints at, and so yours is not so much, although it is language because there's the language of this other world, but it also refers to I don't know how to say it, sort of traditions and spiritual beliefs of the Khoi people, would you say?
Yeah.
Is that accurate way of saying it?
There's quite a bit of mythology that is played out in the book, and mythology that emerges as real in the world. And so I think magic goes really well with mythology. They play with each other, and I wanted to use mythological elements without using European. I didn't want to use Greek mythology, I didn't want to use Nordic mythology, I wanted to use local mythology.
Yeah.
And there's a whole world of mythology that I did some research about. And it's really fascinating and intricate and magical in itself. So I pulled some of those elements into the world of this book. And I found that really, really fascinating because we're not taught local mythology. You know, at schools at university, we're only taught kind of Western mythology.
Yes.
So those elements are kind of laid into the reality and the magic of the setting of the book.
And I mean, so your book, the language, which is also steeped in the culture of both English, Afrikaans, and Arabic, would you say?
Yes, but yes.
And a kind of local version of it. So it really gives a rich and, I don't know, textured, and you can almost smell and taste the
sisters.
yeah, well, I mean, not just the Cook sisters, but yeah, do you want to say something about that?
I think the way we express ourselves obviously is also a product of our environment. You know, I mean, we were flying and I'm looking at the clouds and I'm thinking spookasem. I mean, there's no equivalent in English that can convey spookasem. It doesn't exist. But I mean, clouds, that's the best analogy I could think of, spookasem. So if ever I had to describe clouds, I want to describe them as spookasem and just hope whoever's reading it gets it.
Well, I mean, a certain kind of cloud. There's
Yes, so fluffy.
Yes.
Cumulus and cumulus clouds. So I think that's the thing. I mean, and you can't obviously write authentically about the time if you cannot capture the essence of the time, meaning the language, the way the people spoke or dressed or did what they did.
Yeah. No, so I mean, that also, like I said, adds a whole texture to the model. I mean, you use the language that young people use, and some of it is a mixture of English and, I mean, yeah.
So there's a bit of, perhaps add a bit of like Afrikaans. There's also kind of social media language, like captions on Instagram.
Right.
Like there's a bit of that. I try to hold back a little bit because that language will change in 5 years, will be
Right.
completely different.
Right.
So there's very little other because otherwise,
Yes.
if you don't do it carefully, it ages really bad.
Yeah. But it gives a contemporary feel to your novel, which I mean, obviously in 20 years it won't feel as
Yes.
contemporary. But what did I say?
But I think in 20 years it would actually be a good thing for someone from that background and
Yes.
have a good sense of what young people were all about in 2024.
Yes, also true.
So it has its place.
Yeah, I know. What is the time? We've got time for one more. Okay, so we've got 10 minutes. I'm just going to talk about one other little strand. Well, there are hundreds that we could pull at, but I think this is one that that readers would be interested in, which is that you both write about teenage desire very interestingly. And I mean, I think because of the sense, that I had of you as a traditional Muslim woman, which it was quite something to read the teenage desire and the way, the sexuality and the way it plays out in the book. I mean, it was amazing. So, can you say something about that? Like, how was that for you? How did you?
So after we had that big town launch,
Yes.
the article that came out. So I'm a chef by trade, okay? Well, I'm a chef. I own a restaurant, I bake, I cook, that's what I do. And the headline was, Chef Writes Erotic Coming of Age Novel. And I was like, oh my God, I'm afraid no one I know finds this. Because that's going to be so hard to explain. Because that's not what the book is. But I mean, as a teenager, understanding your sexuality is a big part of who you are. So I couldn't write about a young girl falling in love without touching on that. It had to
So
be
to
there.
speak. Yeah, but I found it, very refreshing and lovely, and yeah, to make space for that.
But also, I do think, maybe there's a tendency to view women who look like me one-dimensionally. I saw a profile on Twitter, it was an advert, and it's a group for men, and the woman doing whatever she was doing was in full face covering, and I was like, oh, like fetish, it's becoming a fetish, which is bizarre. So maybe if women like me just say what they need to say, then we take that whole fetish, what is the word? Fetishization, yes. Take it off the table. Just take it off the table, because, women who look like me are just women.
Yeah.
Just women.
Yeah. Amazing. And do you have anything to say to that point? Writing about teenage desire and sexuality and the expression of it.
Sure, so my book is set now.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot less stigma. My main character, Kayla, she's bisexual. She gets rejected by this woman she's completely in love with. She's wrestling with rejection and depression and lust and all those things. But at no point does she have to even come out to her father. She's just accepted. It's not made an issue of. And I think with books, or for me anyway, that are happening right now, I think it can be really helpful to normalize queer identity, to normalize mental health, all those things, without making it like the crux of the book, without making it like everything is centered around this thing. Rather than that, just it's happening. The characters are this way, that this is happening.
Yeah.
And then it's not the story, It's just something that's a part of the story. So that's what I was really conscious to do, particularly when it came to teenage sexuality, sexual preference, sexual orientation, was just to have it be there.
And the school principal, who has many fascinating aspects to him, is also a wonderful human being and deals with the young people in a great way. I thought that was interesting because often school principals are turned into caricatures. So he's, I don't want to say too much, but he's a fascinating character. Also, your book is very clearly set in Joburg in the 70s, whereas your book you don't say, but I mean it's very obvious to me set in Cape Town. And is that like the Westgate River and
Yes.
Amazon and
Yes, 100% it is because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to call it because Amazon is being bought over at the module. You know, it's really a tough situation. That it's one of our most ancient and culturally, historically, in terms of heritage, one of the most important rivers in Amazon is just building over because the Amazon is very big river. And so my book has a river running through it that is also being built over with gentrification happening all over the city. That that was inspired by the music.
Yeah.
And I mentioned it to my publisher, like I was like, can I call it Amazon? Given that Amazon sells books, and she was like, maybe don't call it Amazon, but everybody knows that.
yeah. Even the river, you didn't call it the Westgate. I mean, it was obvious to me, probably not to you don't live in Cape Town.
Yeah.
But there was a sense of Cape Town. Even
Yes,
without
I
those
tried
things.
to write in a way that this, I mean, my first book is very obviously in Cape Town. This book I tried to write that it could be anywhere in South Africa, but the Cape Town jumped out. So
But I mean, I don't think it's a problem. And it's interesting that you oh, sorry, I can't see.
1 minute left.
1 minute. Okay. So, should I ask if there's a question? Let me just, does anybody have a question? Sorry. It's a very short panel. Well, let me, do you want to, let me finish with this question. What would you, when people read your book, what would you like them to take away? In a nutshell.
Sure, yeah. I think one of the main reasons I wrote as well was it's for teenagers, but for adults as well who are really struggling to be okay, to have a voice when they are deep in depression, deep in grief, or deep in anxiety, to feel seen in a world that doesn't really see them. And I would hope that anybody who feels like that can see that they're not alone.
Thanks. Thank you.
I think for my book, I think the first thing I had to accept early on is that everyone who reads it is going to filter what they read through the prism of their own life experiences. So everyone will take something different out of it. But I would like for everyone who reads it to maybe look at their perceptions of the world and see whether it's going to raise some questions. Maybe make you relook at your worldview.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for traveling all the way from Durban. And thank you for being here with us today, and to the Cape Flats Book Festival for inviting us. Yeah, thanks.